Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the AI Healthcare Podcast. I am your host, Dylan Reed, and today we're joined with my friend, Sean Lyden, who's the founder and CEO of Systematic Selling, and who's also a journalist and author. And he's also an author of this book, Collaboration Effect on Profit with J. David Harper Jr., Russell Clemmer IV, and then you yourself, Sean. I read this book. I learned a lot from it. I just want to say heads up. I bought this book on Amazon, so I'm not saying any of this stuff for promotional purposes. But
Appreciate you doing that.
But I just wanted to say it kind of really helped me think of like things from a different perspective. And it seems like a lot of this stuff, although it's business oriented, you can really take this into non-business situations too as well. Is that kind of what you were aiming for when you were writing the book with these people?
Yeah, I do have to say the main authors being David Harper and Russ Clemmer, it was their concepts that they originally came up. So David came up with the idea of the great 8 virtues. And, it starts with humility and then empathy and then attentiveness and so forth, courage, accountability. And his contribution was, how can we apply these virtues and how they correspond with the vices and counteract the vices? How can we apply that to business culture and in our relationships? And then Russ came up with the concept that's the second half of the book, which is the 3 wins framework. And so that's the company win, the key leader win, and the shareholder win. And the idea of having to have those wins in balance in order for a company to succeed. Well, you can talk about virtues and you can talk about this sense of alignment between different interests. You can say, yeah, that applies to business, but it applies to any type of relationships. Even as a husband and a father, you can apply the 3 wins in the sense of, okay, you've got our win as the parent, you have the win of your children, and you have the win as the family as a whole. And keeping those things in balance is critical. Any type of relationship, you can apply that, and you can apply the virtues as well. So it's across the board. It's about building strong relationships.
And specifically about your career, so you came from a corporate role and then came into pursuing entrepreneurship. So like, what was, with your experiences from corporate to now in the entrepreneurial space, like what is one thing that you wanted people to take away from your contribution to this book?
The key thing that I wanted folks to take away is what I'm actually a practitioner of the collaboration effect on profit. So me being close to David and Russ helped in terms of understanding the concepts. But I've taken those concepts and I apply them to how I coach and train founders and their sales teams to build and scale their sales without the chaos. And it is having the virtues, the 8 virtues in place is critical to be able to scale smoothly. And the 3 wins is critical because you're having to align compensation and incentives with the interests of the company and keeping those things in balance. So my contribution was seeing how these things would play out in various situations on a sales level, and then being able to bring those ideas together into a cohesive book where we talk about you combine the great 8 virtues and the 3 wins. That's what unleashes the collaboration effect on profit.
And in particular, since you being the founder and CEO of Systematic Selling, so could you just define like what it means and kind of what's the story behind it?
Yeah. So I started my company in 2013 as Lyden Communications LLC as a executive ghostwriting and editorial content production agency. So I was on the content side of things. But when I sent emails out to my email list when I first launched that company, I sent it out to folks who were my former clients. I came from the fleet truck sales world. And one of my former clients, he emails me and he says, Sean, I love what you're doing here. Super happy for you going out on your own. Listen, I love the way that you sold to me. Is there any way that you can teach and coach me the methods that you used when you sold to me? And he runs a commercial HVAC company, and at the time it was founder-led sales. He was the one selling. He didn't have any sales reps. It's 11 years later. We still meet on a weekly basis, and he's built out a sales team. But he was my first sales coaching client. And I thought, this will be just a nice little side revenue stream. We're building this agency. But I started falling in love with coaching, and that part just started to grow organically. By 2019, it was 50% of our revenues. By last year, it was 70% of our revenues. And it was also last year that I launched the Systematic Selling newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I reflected back on the previous decade of coaching and going, how can I codify what I've been teaching with these clients a lot of times from scratch, especially as they bring on new sales reps.
Yeah.
These systems, 10 systems that every founder and company needs to generate predictable revenue, strengthen their sales team, and then scale their sales without the chaos. It was then last year that I began fleshing out and codifying the concepts that I've been teaching. And so this year, after we got collaboration effect on profit out into the world,
Mm-hmm.
my mission has been, I want to live out these principles that are in the book and go from strictly being a coaching company to wanting to go all in and scaling and accelerating these ideas of systematic selling out into the world. And that's what my company does.
And you're that phrase "without the chaos" really strikes positively for me. And
Mhm.
particular from what you've seen, is it with companies and sales problems? Is it a lack of understanding of the product? Is it like they don't know how to manage people? Is it they don't understand what they want in their team, or would you say it's a combination of multiple things?
Sure. I I work with companies that will range from, they're hiring their sales rep, or they may have up to 10 sales reps on their team. So they're not huge. They're still working with these smaller companies. And what I found is that the owner or the founder has great intentions, but they're overwhelmed. And so a lot of times they don't have the time to give the attention that their sales hires need in order to succeed. They also, a lot of them struggle with the fact that they don't, as founders, they're fantastic at sales. They don't suck at it. They're great. Their challenge is replicating themselves. And so often the they don't have the patience to teach what these sales reps need. So they'll go, okay, you have experience in sales. We need you come on board and you go out there and get us some business. And it's a sink or swim strategy that isn't really a strategy. Sink or swim is like hope. It is not a strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And too often that's what I see. So what my job has been is to help them uh, take as our name goes, systematic selling, take a systematic and intentional approach to how they how they establish their sales systems before bringing on reps to create an environment that sets them up for success, but then how to evaluate sales talent according to their stage of the company, the character of that sales candidate. Are they a good fit? And then how you develop that sales talent to be a high performing team.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really picked up in this book is, just because you're good at a particular job, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be good at managing people who did that same exact job that you did.
Absolutely. You think of Michael Jordan, fantastic, the GOAT in basketball. Maybe you debate it with LeBron or whatever, but unquestionably one of the best. He had no patience. He would struggle as a coach because it's easy to him.
Mhm.
And so you will see that a lot of times where fantastic sales reps in larger organizations, they get promoted to sales manager and so forth, and they struggle because they don't know how to teach and coach, which is a different skill set.
And it's funny. I really love the sports reference. Who I and I'm not a fan of this college football team, but who I would argue is the most successful at this systematic selling approach and applying it to recruiting is Nick Saban.
Yes. Uh, you think of Nick Saban, you think of Bill Belichick when he was with the Patriots. They were systems folks. They could plug in all sorts of different type of talent,
Hmm.
get them working cohesively. And when we talk about in the book, when you can get everyone rowing in the same direction, that's what unleashes the collaboration effect on profit. It is hard to compete against that.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's look what happened. He's won 7 championships, 6
Mhm.
with Bama, 1 with LSU.
Yep.
That, but yeah, it's all about having an understanding. I've learned since reading this, what do you want, and how do you look to accomplish what you want.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And going off of that point, what are some common misunderstandings behind the systematic selling approach that you've experienced?
The common misunderstandings I will see is they first off, they think, what do we need systems for? I'm really good at sales. So the starting point to go, okay, yes, you are fantastic. And what they do is they'll put unrealistic expectations on whoever they hire. They want them to be like them. And the vast majority of even really talented sales reps aren't going to match them. But since they have that expectation, they get disappointed quickly with them. And what I remind them of is for your organization, your sales team to succeed, they don't need to sell exactly like you.
Hmm.
They don't have to be 100% of you. Even if they were 80% of you, but you had the right systems in place, wow, now you're replicating things. And here's the thing, if you're a founder and you're the one who wants to maintain control of sales, you're really only able to devote maybe 2 to 3 hours at most at sales because you've got a business to run. You've got other things you're needing to do. And unless you're wanting to take yourself on the verge of burnout, that's all you've got. Now, take somebody that's maybe 80% of your ability, but
Hmm.
with the right systems can get them into the 90 percentile of you, but can sell for 8 hours a day.
Hmm.
Now you see the force multiplier. And
Hmm.
so that's the misconception a lot of times is talking with founders who deep down realize they become the bottleneck to growth, but have a difficult time of letting go of sales, whether it's perfectionism or, hey, this is what I love and everything else. But as we talk about in the book, founder syndrome is what keeps your company small. You just simply can't grow beyond that until you're willing to let go. And I tried to help them learn how to let go by showing them the possibilities of, you don't have to find the perfect talent, find good talent, plug them into your systems and let them run with it.
Yeah, and it's and that's kind of one of the other things that I picked up into the book is like it might not impact you now, it might not impact you next week or the next month, but it's eventually going to catch up to you if you don't see control.
Yes.
You know, it all comes crashing down sooner or later. Um, but yeah, no, and it's and it's interesting because in business in particular, and here in the United States, is that it seems like too as well that um, when we look at an organization, when we look at dynamics, kind of what you were saying is we want people that are like us, that think like us, that talk
Mhm.
like us,
Mhm.
and you're just limiting yourself to the demographic or and the other potential demographics that need your products and services.
Yeah, and as a leader, you gotta be very careful of that. You've gotta be careful of surrounding yourself with people who are yes people. I believe some people call it the dictator's dilemma,
Hmm.
meaning people are too your team is too afraid to tell you what you need to hear, which really puts you at a disadvantage to the point that you get blindsided. And the only way that you can overcome that is to surround yourself with people that will challenge you and to encourage it. That is that is one of the virtues that we talk about. It's accountability, and you use accountability, that virtue, to counteract the virtue of greed, because with accountability, we tend to default into that greed aspect of what's best for me. But the moment you get into that realm, you silo yourself. And now you're not hearing outside voices that you may need to hear in order to take in order for you to take your organization where you need to take it.
Yeah, um, and it's interesting, to me with your systematic selling approach. My philosophy, like I have to get to know someone before I sell them something, or
Mhm.
before I tell them like this is what I can offer you, this is what I can do
Yep.
for you, because I don't know, like I don't know the person, they don't know me, so
Yeah.
it's like I have to really it might take two or three conversations to really have an understanding of, oh, this is what this person wants.
Yep.
This is kind of where they're coming from. How do I meet them to make them more secure in who I am, not only in my products or services, but as a person? Because at the end of the day, when people make buying decisions, yes, the product and service is important, but if they don't like the person that's behind those products and services, they're not going to buy it, even if that product or service is going to solve their problems.
Yeah, and I would say even a step above like
Mm,
is trust, because sometimes you can do business, with each other, and it may not be where you like each other, but you trust each other. I imagine it's that way in politics. It's in that way in certain aspects of business where you still got to be able to trust the person on the other side that they will follow through. And the way we teach it at systematic selling is that we look at sales and relationship building on what we call the trust continuum from 0 to 10. 0 is I don't know you, I
mm,
don't trust you, so I'm not sure why would I do business with you,
mm,
to 10, which we call impeccable trust. And these are the types of clients that you have built such a high level of trust with them that it doesn't matter what you're selling. They will beg to buy whatever you're willing to sell to them. And
mm,
that's the ultimate goal. So when you think of between 0 to 10, 0 is All right, you're about to do a cold outreach or make an introduction. You meet them, say, at a networking event. Now they're a 1 or a 2.
Mhm.
They're not ready for you at this point unless they invite you or ask you. They're not ready for you to say, "Hey, how can you help me?"
Mhm.
You're still in that initial stages of trust. But usually, as you cultivate that relationship over time,
Mhm.
they'll get to a 3 or a 4, and usually at a 4, they're like, "Hey, let's grab coffee. Let's meet one-on-one, talk about what you do and so forth." And then eventually you uncover more about them and go, "Hey, would you find any value if you did this?" Something that would be a part of a solution that you could offer. And they'll go, wouldn't hurt looking at it. And then
Mhm.
you schedule the discovery call. And then by the time you're at a, discovery, you're at a 5, you move to a 6 where they're ready for a proposal. And then by a 6 to a 7, they'll probably say yes if they feel that level of trust. And
Mhm.
then as you deliver, you taking them from a 7 to an 8. And then over time, could be a few months, could be a few years, you take them from an 8 to a 10. And then you realize that it the trust continuum is dynamic and not static. You
Mhm.
could be at an 8 today with a client, but if you don't deliver, if you withdraw from that trust account, you may drop it down to a 6 or a 5. Now you got to rebuild that trust. So that's why I love looking at sales relationships, really any relationship, through the lens of the trust continuum, because you're constantly assessing how well you're doing in that realm. Is what you're doing nudging them along the direction you want them to go on the trust continuum, or are you making withdrawals that you're soon going to need to repay?
Yeah. And and that bleeds into my next question nicely. So how do you see the systematic selling approach being applied to AI in healthcare, just given the amount of technology nowadays?
I I think it's a matter of, and again, it depends on the person that is dealing with it. But if we're just talking on a macro level, one of the challenges with AI to any industry is that there's this level of, one, fear,
Mhm.
2, complexity. Wow, this is really complex. Know if I am ready to delve into it. And anytime people feel those two, the fear and the overwhelm of complexity, that's when they procrastinate to make any type of advancement or improvement, or look at ways that they can apply this technology in in their sphere of influence. So the way the systematic selling approach would work is that you meet people with where they are. You have that sense of empathy of, this is probably complex to you. You're like, why would I, what my eyes are rolling in the back of my head because I had no clue how to do this. Totally get it. Here's a way that such and such company is using it that's similar to you.
Mhm.
Do you see does that resonate at all with what you're doing? Or are there other aspects of this that may be a better fit or better alignment with what you think might help support you guys? That
Mhm.
it's that level. It's meeting people where they are and then being systematic in nudging them along, to gain greater comfortability with the idea of this technology,
And
whether it's testing it out and so forth.
do you see that trust factor, just given the amount of how much technology has changed? Do you see it being harder in relation to systematic selling, easier, or would you say it's just different?
And when you say the trust factor with systematic selling, relative to what? So I understand the
Yeah,
context.
relative to trying to build a relationship with that respective person, basically pre-selling.
Yeah. When you say getting harder or easier, is it relative to technology, the emergence of all this technology?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd put it on the sense of whether it's harder or easier. I think it's more of taking a evergreen concept of meeting people where they are.
Mhm.
Like, when I say evergreen, I mean, we're talking about AI and emerging technologies. I'm talking about the things that Aristotle taught when it came to persuasion,
Mhm.
where he had the three pillars of persuasion of ethos and pathos and logos. So what those terms are is ethos is, do you have the credibility? Are you coming from a place of credibility where your audience sees you as being credible? Okay, can I trust you? All right. Pathos has to do with emotional connection. Do I have fear right now and you're coming at me with all this confidence? We're mismatched. If
Mhm.
I'm at fear, I need you to meet me where my state of mind is now, right? And then logos is where we get our English word logic. And it's okay, you've gotten my attention on an emotional basis. I am open. Now that logic is that bridge of taking me where I am right now in the sense of fear and overwhelm and walking side by side with me to envision a a present and a future that's full of opportunity and hope that this technology can bring. So all we do at Systematic Selling is we take those ancient concepts and we basically systematize it. And
Mhm.
nothing's changed in 2,000 years, or actually 5,000 years. But it applies anytime you have this sense of something new, because something new creates change. Change causes fear. So you got to meet people where they are.
Mhm. Wow. And it's it's a very simple way to put it.
Mm.
And is that kind of so specifically with the systematic selling approach, meeting people where they are, and
Hmm.
that could literally be going all the way back to square one to they could be literally at the end of the at the end of the rainbow with a pot of gold, and you're just trying to catch them.
Yeah. If they're at the end of the rainbow and they're near their promised land, they're at their promised land.
Uh huh.
What's next? You're taking them there. So,
Hmm.
or how do you ensure that you don't slide back? What are the pitfalls here that you're here?
Hmm. And it seems like with relationships in particular, and I will say I grew up in the internet age, so I kind of like fell into the internet with all this
Yeah.
technology. It seems like relationship building and speak amongst my generation and younger, it seems like that's kind of a lost art. Like, and I mean, do you like have you noticed with systematic selling different generations kind of taking the information differently, or?
I do, in the sense that when I'm working with younger sales reps, what I'm having to do is teach them to handle high stakes, potentially volatile situations in live conversations instead of text-based communications. So, hey, if you're spending more than 5 or 10 minutes trying to craft an email to counteract an invoice dispute, pick up the phone and call them and talk it through with them. Because if it's something that takes a lot of angst and trying to figure it out, am I being clear in writing? You're not going to be clear in writing. So it's teaching folks who tend to be text based first and have gotten used to that, to teaching them to be live conversational,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to volatile, emotionally charged situations, that you want to make sure that the other side truly understands.
Hmm.
And that can really only be achieved when you're able to gain social cues and so forth. Because when you're looking at a screen, whether it's on a text or an email, it's very hard to get social cues.
Hmm.
I forget who said it, but you have this what's called a negativity bias, meaning when things are in writing, whoever is sending it, let's say they're at a neutral, they're at a zero on a, say, a range of -5 to +5. They're at a zero as a neutral. But we naturally look at it as the receiver about two notches below that. So somebody sending something neutral will look negative to us. And that's the way we interpret it. And then that creates this whole vicious cycle of how do I respond to that and so
Hmm.
forth. So that is the area that I have seen the most. And the sales reps who succeed are the ones who learn to adapt their communication style to know these are the times when I get them on a phone call or I go see them in a meeting. And these are the times when, hey, it's okay. We'll go ahead and send a text. And sometimes when you have this high stakes conversation, you do it over the phone or in person, and then you send a recap email. Here's my understanding of our conversation. So then you cover both bases.
Yeah. And you bring up an interesting point because the older I've gotten, the more I've started to pay attention to people's body language and just kind of their um, facial facial
Yeah.
expressions. Like I've blanking on the name of the book, but it basically talked about the majority of communication is actually nonverbal.
Yes.
So, you start to, when you pay attention to those nonverbal cues, you start to get a good sense of, oh, this person is going to totally buy for me, or they're not going to buy for me at all, regardless how much trust they have with me, or they're interested, they're just not sure. So it's interesting when you see people's face, nonverbal communication signs. You're like, okay, now I know. It's literally like a split second. You're able to totally tailor the conversation differently.
Yes, you can look at them and go based on their facial expression, go, oh, I think I completely missed the mark with that, didn't I? You're
Yeah.
able to label things and then they go, well, yeah, it's this and that. Or, no, actually, I totally got it. So you're able to clarify. And and you're the back and forth aspect of it
Uh-huh.
allows you each volley it's just another node of trust that you're building with them.
Mhm. And to change gears a little bit, so you're also an avid saxophone player. So do you
Yes.
have any favorite jazz songs or jazz artists? Are you playing around where you are?
Actually, it's wild. I'm not a jazz player. I did play in jazz band through college and so forth. My love is the blues
Hmm.
and classic rock. So my favorite blues player is Gary Moore. He's a Irish guitarist, and he's he passed away in 2011. I regret never having watched him live because I didn't fall in love with his music until, good gosh, 5 or 6 years ago. But I am most inspired as a sax player, not by other sax players. I'm inspired by guitarists, blues guitarists. And that's the type of style that I love, so it's I'll take even just, you know, straight up, you know, songs, take something like Hallelujah and turn and give it more of a blues feel to it because that's what I feel. And there's nothing like the blues that just, you know, gets gets to you. And I know you're a huge country music fan, and
Yeah.
country has a lot of roots in the blues. And Chris Stapleton is I know he's a country singer, but
Yeah.
gosh, he's got the soul of blues.
Uh-huh.
And I play. I cover his song "Cold"
Hmm.
in some of my events, and it's one of my favorites to cover because the entire just the way he lays everything down is just it gives you such freedom to work off of. When I'm covering his vocals, and then when I'm plugging in sax solos, it's it's just a beautiful song.
And how long have you been playing the saxophone?
I picked it up in 1986,
Before I was
and
born.
yeah, well before you were born. I picked it up because played the clarinet in sixth grade, and before my seventh grade year, that summer, I saw Bruce Springsteen's. I saw a video of Bruce Springsteen's sax player Clarence Clemens playing this epic solo on the song Jungle Land. It's like 3 minutes long. It's just so beautiful. And I remember hearing that. I fell in love. I was like, I want to play the sax. So I started playing the sax in seventh grade. I I played through high school, and I was an athlete. So I went to college at Stanford University in Birmingham, Alabama, as a cross country and track scholarship athlete. I didn't think I was going to play the sax again, but my sophomore year, I tried out for the jazz band and got in, and it was through playing the sax that I met my wife. At a performance,
Hmm.
and we'll be married for 30 years coming up. But from after we got married till I till we empty nested in, I think it was 2019, I picked up the horn again. So I've been playing now for the past 5 years after that 20-year hiatus, doing private events. I'll show up at some open mics if I need to like try out some new material and so forth. Tonight, a guitar player is playing about 30 minutes from us, and he asked me, he said, "Hey, you want to come up and jam a little bit?" So I'll be going up and playing at a pub and just probably jam with him for about 30 minutes, that type
Wow.
of thing.
Wow. And it's yeah, and you bring up an interesting point. So the first thing I actually want to say is Clarence was hit Bruce's sax player for like a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and he passed away actually not too long ago.
No, not too long ago. And yeah, he's the reason I picked it up, the big man.
Wow. And specifically too as well, like how have you been able to apply your systematic selling approach when it comes to meeting other musically minded people too as well?
Yeah. I think where I've applied it more is how I'm able to find gigs and stuff like that, because a lot of times musicians are creative types and they don't understand sales. So systematic selling really helps with that. But what it also ties into is that you view open mic
Hmm.
opportunities as part of your sales approach. That's part of prospecting. And then that translates to how you do things in business. Like when you post on LinkedIn
Hmm.
and you're sharing ideas and expertise, I think that open, like you have this free time, you're able to show what you're able to do, give people a taste
Hmm.
of your expertise and a taste of, hey, let me give this a shot. Oh, this works. Now you've built credibility to where they go, hey, can you help me with this? So, you're able to jump on the trust continuum. Well, that happens in music when you're playing at these open mics. People would go, hey, we would love to have, say, a sax player play at one of our private events. Heard you here. Would you be open to playing for us? That type of thing. So that's where, when you think systematically, you go, okay, yes, I'm having fun as I'm going to these open mics,
Hmm.
but I do it so that I can make that part of my marketing.
And you bring up an interesting point. So I also host another podcast called Down in the Country Podcast, where I interview up and coming country music artists. And I wasn't even thinking about systematic selling at the time, but it's like, well, if one person has a good experience, that turns into like five people, and then like that turns into like two more people, and it's amazing to see what happens from just one good experience. Everyone wants to be part of that story too, as well.
Yeah, and so then it becomes a question of how can you create those experiences that people can get exposed to, and
Hmm.
that goes to your yeah, system one, making sure you have the right messaging, the system two, prospecting. So prospecting, getting these opportunities, getting yourself out in front, and so as a musician, using your social media accounts, your YouTube, so your recordings. Uh, you know, I've used DMs of different venues and go, hey, I'm curious who books your live events, and
Hmm.
they'll say, hey, it's so and so. Here's their email. Perfect. And then you reach out, and now you're building a lead to now they're becoming prospect list, and then you just keep them in the loop. Hey, had this event. Here's a link to it. Wanted to keep you posted.
Hmm. And it's amazing to me, like, you know, in the country music space, but I'm also assuming the blues space too as well. Everyone knows each other in some way, shape, or form. So it's like, all the producers know each other, all the guitar players know each other. So it's
They
amazing.
do, and when you're talking about these country artists, that you're talking about a realm where these are aspiring folks who want to be, you know, uh, uh, you know, make it big type of thing, and definitely you're in that realm where everybody knows each other. It's similar here, but the way we see it is it wouldn't necessarily be siloed among, say, blues musicians or rock musicians or country and so forth. It's more of, hey, we got a lot of camaraderie as local musicians here in Central Florida. So you get to know each other and get to see their different styles. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, I know folks love grunge music, and you just it's that camaraderie. And for me, it's completely different set of relationships than I do in business. When
Mhm.
you're working with musicians or around musicians and creatives, it's so different than when you're working with executives.
And I think the movie that I really think of, um, what you just mentioned is Rudy with
Mm.
Sean Astin from 1993. It talks about how he had different people in his life that really helped him get to where he wanted to go. And you said you alluded to the same thing. You need to have different people in your life to um, get to your maximum potential.
Yeah, it gives you balance and different perspectives.
And the one last question I did have is, how do you envision systematic selling being applied to public policy overall, or how would you like to see it be applied to public policy?
Well, the way I see it not applied in public policy is when I see government officials,
Mm.
they tend to speak only to those who will agree and dismiss those who won't. And how can we find enough people who agree and strong arm those that we need to strong arm in order to get to advance whatever policy position we want advanced? It's not persuasion that I observe. You're in that,
Mhm.
I'm an outsider looking in, but what I observe is more of this sense of coercion of, you know, if you want this, you're going to need to go for that, and that's how you advance it. Systematic selling is more of a trust-based approach. It's about finding alignment. It's about crossing the aisle of people who may come to disagreements and go, where do we align? How can we? A lot of times you'll have in the political spectrum, left and right will agree to the same outcome, but because the way that the one side frames it
Hmm.
publicly to the other, it repels the other. And to go, okay, we want the same goal. Let's talk about how we can tackle that goal together. And I'm curious to you, how do you see it from a public policy realm that ever changes? Because it seems the incentives go back to the collaboration effect on profit. If you've got dysfunctional incentives or misalignment, you'll get dysfunctional results. How do you see that improving in the public policy realm?
Well, and you bring up that's a great question. And I think part of the problem is that people just don't understand each other. So, and I think like if you don't even build those, I don't, basic relationships. So it's like prime example, it's like if I know that you're a sports fan and if I'm a sports fan and we both like golf, then it's like, if we can build upon that and
Mhm.
then get to like, okay, like I have a credibility with you and hobbies, how can I get credibility with kind of what your self interests are and
Yep.
what you're really looking to accomplish? And it's really, and I think what I think the problem is that people don't really want to understand other people's self interest. But I
Mhm.
think that if you, and it's the same thing with systematic selling, which I really took away from this book right here, is like if you can understand what someone's self interest is, then you can really run far with that.
Yeah, because then you can go, okay, how can I win by helping them win? What
Hmm.
is their win? And that that's the essence. I don't see it right now in the way the incentive structure is in public policy for that being the case. It appears so siloed, unfortunately.
Yeah. And Sean, where can people find more about you and where can people find this book too as well?
Sure. So they can find more about me at systematicselling.co. That's my newsletter. They can also find me on LinkedIn at Sean+M Lyden, Twitter or X at Sean+M Lyden. That's M as in Matthew. And then can always reach out to me via email at Sean, SEAN, at systematic-selling.com.
Awesome. And then the book too as well.
The book, you can find it on Amazon. Put on collaboration effect on profit, and it'll pop right up. We have it in all three formats: the physical version, the Kindle version, and now it's on Audible.
Awesome. And don't forget to subscribe to the AI Healthcare Podcast on YouTube and also listen to the audio version of this podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Sean, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it so much, Dylan. It's a privilege, as always, meeting with you.
Same here. And this is Dylan Reed signing off.